What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton just caused an earthquake inside Ferrari? In just one race? Because what happened at the Australian Grand Prix made something very clear within the paddock. Hamilton is back, and he has done so much sooner than anyone expected. Many thought that his adaptation to Ferrari was going to be slow, complicated, even painful. A driver who arrived at a new team in a completely different car, with a teammate like Charles Leclerc who knows the structure like no one else. But in Melbourne something happened that not even Ferrari himself expected. During the race, Hamilton began to show a pace that surprised even within the team. Lap after lap he was closing the gap, managing the tires with a consistency that had not been seen for years and getting dangerously close to the leading pace, to the point that at the end of the race he uttered a phrase that left everyone looking at the data. Hamilton assured that if the race had had just a couple more laps, he would have overtaken Leclerc. And at that moment something changed within Ferrari. Because it was no longer about adaptation. It was no longer about learning. What Ferrari began to see in Australia was something much more serious. A Hamilton completely connected to the car, and ready to fight. And that left Leclerc and Vasseur completely surprised. The Australian Grand Prix did not seem at first the ideal setting to talk about a rebirth. Ferrari arrived in Melbourne with moderate expectations, still trying to understand the true potential of the new car and feeling that Mercedes and McLaren could be a step ahead in terms of pure performance. Within the team itself there was caution. Nobody wanted to send overly optimistic messages before seeing how the SF26 performed in a real race, with traffic, strategy and tire degradation. However, what began as a weekend of analysis ended up revealing something that Ferrari did not expect to see so soon. A Lewis Hamilton completely connected to the car from a competitive point of view. The most interesting thing is that this impact did not occur in a spectacular way in qualifying or with a magical lap that surprised the paddock. The real blow came in the race, when the real pace started to tell a completely different story. Hamilton had to build his result from a difficult position, something that in many cases tends to limit a driver's options throughout the race. But instead of getting stuck in the middle, he began to push through the front group with a consistency that caught the attention of Ferrari's engineers. Lap after lap he reduced the distance, maintaining a very solid pace in long runs and showing tire management that became one of the key points of his performance. That consistency was precisely what surprised within the team. For years, Hamilton had struggled to exploit that kind of strategic management at Mercedes due to the car's limitations in certain conditions. However, in Melbourne it looked something different. The Ferrari allowed him to attack when necessary and at the same time, conserve tires for the end of the stint. That combination is extremely dangerous when in the hands of a driver with his experience, because it means he can choose when to push and when to control the pace without destroying the car's performance. As the race progressed, the data coming into Ferrari's wall began to show an unexpected reality. Not only was Hamilton keeping pace with the front group, but at points he was lapping even faster than his own teammate. This became especially evident when both pilots began to ride in clean air, without traffic to distort the references. At that moment it was clear that the Briton was finding a very competitive rhythm, something that reinforced the feeling that his adaptation to the Ferrari was happening much faster than expected. And that is where the story that shook the atmosphere within Ferrari really begins. Because when a driver new to the team is able to show that level of pace in just one of his first races, internal perception inevitably changes. It's not just about scoring points or finishing in a strong position. It is about demonstrating that there is a real connection between driver and car, a kind of synchronicity that can completely transform the potential of a project. For Charles Leclerc, who has been the team's sporting reference for years, these types of signals are especially significant. The Monegasque knows perfectly how the Ferrari behaves, has worked for entire seasons on its development and has been the natural leader within the garage. But in Australia a new factor began to appear in the equation. Hamilton was not simply learning, he was competing at the same level from the first moment. And if that is confirmed in the upcoming races, Ferrari could find itself with a completely new situation. Because what began to be seen in Melbourne was not only a good competitive debut. It was the possibility that Lewis Hamilton is beginning a real return to the level that made him one of the most dominant drivers in Formula One history. If the Australian Grand Prix made anything clear, it is that Hamilton's impact is not limited to a simple good performance. What began to worry, and at the same time excite, within Ferrari was the way in which the Briton built his career. Because it was not an explosive performance based on a specific moment, but rather a constant, calculated progression, very typical of a driver who perfectly understands how to gain time lap after lap. As the race progressed, Hamilton began to show one of the qualities that has always defined his style. The ability to maintain an extremely stable pace over long runs, something that in modern Formula One can make a huge difference when the tires begin to degrade. That was precisely the moment when the team's engineers began to look more closely at the data. While other drivers began to suffer with degradation and lost consistency in their times, Hamilton achieved something very difficult to achieve: maintain the pace without punishing the tires excessively. This ability to manage the race is one of the most dangerous weapons a driver can have, because it allows you to attack at the exact moment when your rivals begin to lose performance. In Melbourne, it was clear how the Briton could push when necessary and then stabilize the pace without compromising the end of the stint. But the most interesting thing is that all this happened in a car that is not yet considered the fastest on the grid. Within Ferrari, there is a feeling that the technical package still has limitations compared to some of its direct rivals. Even from the team itself, it has been recognized that, in absolute terms, Mercedes showed superior performance during the weekend. This means that the result and the pace that Hamilton achieved in the race have even more value, because they were built maximizing what the car could offer at that time. In other words, Hamilton wasn't simply taking advantage of a dominant car. I was extracting real performance from a package that is still evolving. And that's exactly what Ferrari has been looking for years: a driver capable of getting more out of the car than it apparently allows on paper. Inside the garage, this situation begins to generate a very interesting dynamic. Charles Leclerc remains one of the fastest drivers on the grid in qualifying and has long been the team's natural reference point. However, the type of performance Hamilton showed in Australia points to a much more intense internal battle than many imagined at the start of the season. It is not simply about comparing a fast lap or a final position. It's about something deeper: who is able to maintain the pace when the race enters its most strategic phase. What happened in Melbourne might seem, at first glance, simply the promising beginning of a new era. But when analyzed more calmly, the true impact of Hamilton's career goes far beyond a good one-off result. What Ferrari saw in Australia was the first clear sign that its commitment to the seven-time world champion could transform the team's dynamic much sooner than expected. And that has huge implications for the rest of the season. Because Ferrari didn't just sign Hamilton for his speed. He signed him for his experience, his ability to develop a car, and his competitive mentality at key moments in the championship. The first signs of that impact began to be seen in Australia. It wasn't a spectacular victory or podium, but it was something that is often even more valuable to engineers: consistency, race control, and the feeling that the driver understands exactly what the car needs. For Charles Leclerc, this also opens a new scenario within the team. For years he has been the natural leader of Ferrari's sports project, the driver around whom much of the car's development has been built. But Hamilton's arrival was always going to generate a new internal dynamic, and Melbourne has been the first clue as to how that competitive relationship could develop. Not necessarily as a conflict, but as a constant pressure that can raise the performance of both drivers. Ferrari, in fact, could benefit greatly from that situation. Having two drivers capable of pushing each other to the limit is usually one of the most effective formulas for improving a team's performance throughout a season. Every data, every fast lap, and every race analysis becomes valuable information to evolve the car. And when both drivers are fighting at the highest level, technical development tends to accelerate naturally. Therefore, the true meaning of the Australian Grand Prix could be better understood as the next races pass. Melbourne was not simply the scene of Hamilton's competitive debut with Ferrari. It was the first indication that the project could have much more potential than many imagined at the beginning of the year. If Hamilton continues to show this level of adaptation and continues to find rhythm in racing, Ferrari could find something it has been looking for a long time: a driver capable of leading the project in the most demanding moments of the championship. The Australian Grand Prix left much more than the first points of the season. For Ferrari, it was a race that revealed something that could set the direction of the project for the entire year. Lewis Hamilton appears to have found his place in the team much sooner than expected. What was seen in Melbourne was not simply the performance of an experienced driver trying to adapt to a new car, but the return of a competitor who perfectly understands how to build a race, manage critical moments, and squeeze every available tenth out of the car. The pace he showed during the race, especially in the long runs and in the final stretch, was enough to set off alarm bells within the team itself. Even Hamilton himself made it clear that he felt he had the pace to attack his teammate if the race had lasted a little longer, a statement that reflects the confidence he began to build with the car since the first Grand Prix of the season. That feeling of control and competitiveness is exactly what Ferrari expected when it decided to bet on it for this new stage. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.